Hey everyone, welcome back to ACT Math Quick Hits, where you can make one small change and watch these videos. It doesn't cost any money, only costs you a couple minutes of your time, a couple days a week, and you're going to help improve your ACT math score. So here is the rundown of the math section of the ACT, and let's get back into it for today. All right, today's question is a beast. It says the table gives the values of f of x, g of x, and h of x, right? So everything's in function notation, which is already complicated. And it says for all positive integers, x is less than or equal to 5. So that just means our inputs, our x values, have to be 1, 2, 3, 4, and then equal to 5, right? Which we see that all the way on the left. Then it tells us, given h of f of g of some number a is equal to 1. So a is some positive integer, less than or equal to 5. What is the value of a? So basically, it wants to know what input value could we put in for a that after it goes into the g function, it would go into the f function, it would go into the h function, then the output would be 1. So it's complicated because it's function notation. It's complicated because we have to take an input, get an output, and then put that output back into an input of another function. That's even hard for me to say. Now, I played around with this quite a bit because I was really hoping that we could use Desmos for this. And let me just show you what I did in the Desmos. I created a table with the x sub 1, and then I had to call it y sub 1, y sub 2, or y sub 3, because if I started calling it the functions that they gave us with the f and the g, it wouldn't let me input anything. I could put something in for the x piece, but then when I try to click on this, it won't let me put any value in. I mean, I can arrow over there, but it still won't let me put values in. So the best I could do is make a table with like y sub 1s, y sub 2s. I even put in like the function notation at the bottom, but without having an actual function, it won't actually do any calculations. I tried to look at doing the regression, right? We can click on these dots and we can do regression for the different functions. And then maybe I could have used that, but like if you notice these functions, like the regression doesn't even line up with the points I got. So, and again, I don't know if it's linear. I don't know if it's supposed to be cubic, quadratic, or whatever. So Desmos actually is not going to help us here, which I was really disappointed. I really thought we could use Desmos to help power through this question, but it doesn't do us any good. So what we have to do is we just have to understand, okay, what is happening here? And really, it could come down to guessing and checking, right? Notice we have an input of 2, 3, 4, and 5. So let me just go through a round of this before we kind of figure out what we need to, like how we can figure this out a little bit quicker. So this is going to be a little bit longer video today, so I apologize for this length. Again, this might be one of these questions, and this one's at the end, right? This is 44. It's one away from the end. But this would be one of these questions that I would probably skip if I was taking the test, flag it, and then come back to it at the very end, because it's going to take us some time to do it. It's going to take you some time to do it, probably to figure it out. So this would be one of those things that you skip, so you have plenty of time on the rest of them. There's a lot of easier questions you could do, and then you come back to this one, and if you run out of time, you could always guess, right? And you get a 1 out of 4 chance of guessing. All right, so here we go. So I'm just going to kind of walk through like what we're doing if we were just going to guess and check to see. So the first option there, 2, right? So what that's telling me is that, okay, if I take this input of 2 and I put it into all my functions, am I going to get an output of 1? So what we have is we have h of f of g of 2, right? Close all these parentheses. And does that give me 1, right? So that's what this is asking. So what we have to do is we have to do the evaluation of g of 2, right? So when the input is 2, what is the output of g? Well, if we look to our table, it shows us right there the output is 5. Okay, so I know g of 2 is 5. So what that tells me is I replace this whole thing on the inside with 5. G of 2 becomes 5. So now what I'm doing is I'm doing f of 5. And then after I get that, I will do h of whatever that thing is, right? And we're still trying to figure out, does this give us 2? So let me do f of 5 and see what happens. So again, my input now is 5. And here's my f function, gives me an output of 3. So I can replace this piece here with 3. So h of 3 equals, does it equal 1, right? That's our question we're asking. All right, so h of 3, there's my input of 3, and I go to my h piece, it gives me an output of 5. So h of 3 gives us 5, which is not what we want, right? We wanted 1. So it can't be that first choice, right? And so that's what we're actually doing here. We're just taking the inputs that they give us, put them into the correct function, and then the output of the first function, the g function, then becomes the input of the f function. Like I said, that's really hard to say. I can only imagine it's 100 times worse to understand. All right, so let's try to make this a little bit easier. Ultimately, what we're doing is we want to know h of some number has to give us 1, right? That's the end game of this. Well, if we go to our table and we notice that this input of 2 gives us that h value of 1. So I need h of 2 at the end, because then that gives me that input of 1. All right, so then we just have to go back in time, right? So I need the f piece. I need f of something to give me 2, because right as I kind of walk through that example to show you that once we figure out that f output, it becomes the input of h. So where is my output of 2 for f? Well, there is my output of 2 for f, right? A input of 1 gives me that output of 2 for f. All right, so now I know what that piece is. Well, then I got to go back in time again. I got to go to g of something. And again, what do I want? I want my g output to be 1, because that output becomes the input into the f function. So now I go to the g part of the table, and there is their output of 1. So the input is 5. So then if I, walked through this the same way, g of 5 gives me 1. So I put that into the f function. F of 1 gives me 2. And I put that into the h function. H of 2 gives me 1. So our answer here is choice D. Whew. All right, what a monster that was today. So sorry for the length. But thanks for watching. Thanks for listening. Again, I know that this isn't the most fun stuff out there. The videos aren't the most polished, but we're here to do some math. Hopefully learn some Desmos hacks. Unfortunately, not today. And your future self is really going to appreciate it if you like and subscribe. That way you can keep getting these math quick hits and improve your math ACT score. All right, so choice D. All right, thanks, everyone.